All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls in the house. I don't know. I'm going to call you the Apple guru extraordinaire. Rene Ritchie joining us because we're going to talk all about iPhone 12 Pro, iPhone 12, iPhone thing. Rene, thanks so much for coming out and hanging out, man.
Oh, thanks for having me on, man. It's one of my favorite places to be.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so Rene, first of all, there might be people out there that aren't familiar with your work. I got to show love to you. You're a indie creator that started up recently and is just doing amazing. So let people know kind of what you do and where they can find you.
Yeah, I make videos about Apple, sort of educational video essays about Apple, their products, and what I think their strategies and business and their place in the industry. And I'm just at youtube.com/Rene Ritchie. Very, very boring with my my URL scheme.
Hey, mine's Brian Tong. I think that's okay.
I'm a good company then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, for people that may not also know, how long, if you even have a number on it, you and I have both been covering Apple for a while, but how long have you actually been covering Apple?
I got hired for what became iMore. Back then, I forget, I think it was called the Phone Different by Dieter Bohn, now at The Verge, back in 2008.
2000. So we're talking about 2008, we're at 20. So roughly 12 plus years or so, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, you and I have seen a lot of things. Also, you know, we are users. We've been deep in that ecosystem for a while. So obviously the big thing right now, this is iPhone season, as they say.
Yes.
And the 12 Pro came out. I have not seen anyone's reviews deliberately. So this is why I love talking to you, because you and I are going to kind of have fresh takes with each other. So I kind of wanted to, I know it's saying, what do you think about the iPhone 12? But what did you think about the iPhone 12 Pro specifically? And then we'll kind of play off from there.
Yeah, I really like the Pro. It's still my default phone for, I guess, two main reasons. One is the camera. I love what Apple calls a telephoto. It's really like 54 millimeters, so it's barely a telephoto. But I just love the way a 50 millimeter looks, like 50 to 80 for portraits, for product photography, videography. I love the compression you get. I just love I love the whole look of it. So that's really important, and I really miss it when it's not on a phone. And then also 6 gigabytes of RAM. And I know Apple doesn't make a big deal about RAM because it's such a different thing than on Android, because there's no it's a native language, it's not interpreted. It doesn't have to carry a bunch of baggage for different vendor implementations. There's no garbage collection. So you don't need as much RAM on an iPhone as you do on an Android phone. But still, like, even things like Pokemon Go and Instagram stay in memory for hours, and I'm shocked. I press the button and they're just running, and I'm just not used to that feeling.
So now I know what your top 2 most used apps are. I mean, those are the examples you gave. So you're still rocking that Pokemon Go. Is that what you're telling me?
I have, for various reasons, I'm not 100% happy with how Niantic has been handling it through, all of 2020. So I don't play as much anymore, but it's still, because it fires GPS and the screen and all the radios, and it is the fastest way for me to deplete an iPhone. So I still use it for battery testing every time.
So, for me, obviously, we both come from an 11 Pro. So I like to lay that groundwork as a perspective, because that does definitely change how you perceive the iPhone 12 Pro, depending on what phone you've come from. A lot of people aren't always on the latest phone the year before. Now, for me, I jumped to the 11 Pro. I never got a 10S. I had a 10, skipped the 10S, and then jumped to the 11 Pro and was blown away by the camera system, how fluid it was, the triple lens, how they're using that. Now, with the 12 Pro being a video creator like you, cameras matter, and obviously not only are the stills really, really, really good, but the video on an iPhone is second to none when we're talking about just the image quality. And so Dolby Vision HDR got me really excited. I think after playing with it for a while, we've realized that it's kind of way ahead of its time from a standpoint of it's going to take some time for apps. People may not know this, and I got really excited about Dolby Vision HDR, and I still am. But the workflow right now is really self-contained, and maybe this is kind of done deliberately too, in a way where you got to use, iMovie. You've got to sometimes you got to use iMovie even to bring the files over to Final Cut Pro, and that's not even the easiest. But really, the best kind of seamless, least barrier to entry is iPhone 12 Pro, iMovie on that device, and then publish it. I tried putting HDR video on an Instagram post, and it didn't know what to do with it. It completely blew it out. Like, They don't have a way to handle Dolby Vision HDR yet. With Twitter, at least they put a normal video up there. They didn't oversaturate. They found whatever they converted it to. That was all right. I used Adobe Premiere actually to edit. It didn't obviously take it in as HDR. So I love the fact that it's there, but unless I'm going iPhone to iMovie to final product, which I'm not, we can't really take full advantage of it yet.
I had similar, although a little bit different experiences. For some reason, it worked on Instagram, and I don't know why that is. I just assumed it was taking, because Apple's recording both the HDR tone map and the SDR tone map at the same time, and it's supposed to give it to whatever device appreciates it. And I didn't think Instagram would have a way to tell, and maybe I just got lucky, or the specifics of that video didn't show any highlights that were blowing it out. But it seemed to look like a normal video. But like I pulled it into Final Cut Pro and I was in a Rec 709 timeline and it said, you need a Rec 2020 timeline for this, or you need to use HDR tools, and set it to 709. And I did that, and then it's just like, it's so dull at that point. And this was before the iMovie update came out, but I'm happy they did it because it looks phenomenal. And I'll be super happy in like 2 months when all the apps and everything have caught up with it. Because even if I don't use the HDR, just saving myself with those 2 extra stops of dynamic range if I under or overexpose something is going to be great.
I mean, it looks amazing on the phone, right? I mean, when you have an HDR video, it pops off the phone. You know, you even see for a moment when it displays it when it's in your gallery, it's normal looking, and then right when it's about to play, it just pops, and you're like, oh, okay. Like, I like the fact that we can actually see the difference. But to your point, we're going to have to wait a little bit for others to catch up and for things to figure itself out. But it also kind of was indicative to me of, with the iPhone 12 Pro, a lot of things here where this is still a great phone, but there's a lot of things that are kind of, I don't know if it's future-proofing itself, but you still kind of have to wait a little bit for it. You know, we talk about 5G, which Apple obviously touted. They brought in Verizon, a major carrier partner. I don't know about you, but where I live, and I'm on AT&T, and it sounds like Verizon is at least more prolific, but still not widespread. I went to 3 locations within probably around a 5-mile radius, different cities or areas in Southern California, and I never got any type of 5G plus signal. We're not talking about 5G-E, which is what appears on your phone, but 5G plus. So I never experienced it at all. It's not even in my immediate area. And I've got to imagine, and I'm pretty sure you're right, that's more common than not. When we see some of the videos, people are seeking out a specific 5G, but most of us do not have it around us. So that's kind of another way of how this thing is a little ahead of its time, but still really good, but still a little ahead of its time. I don't know how you feel about the whole 5G situation.
Yeah, it's interesting and it's complicated, and it feels like in many ways LTE was just such a consistent, sane implementation no matter where you went. We got rid of all the CDMA versus GSM versus EVDO versus HSPA. We got rid of all that nonsense, and now it's all back again with the vengeance with 5G because the US has millimeter wave, high band 5G, and almost nobody else has that. And that's when you get the 5G Plus on AT&T or the 5G wideband on Verizon, not even branding millimeter wave the same way. So you see like MKBHD and it's, driving down the streets of New York hunting for that millimeter wave signal or whatever. Most of the world has, in some ways, more mature 5G. Canada is sort of in the middle. Our auctions got pushed off because of 2020 till next year. So we have low and a little bit of mid-band. But for some like strange, lucky, I wonder if Rogers and Telus and Bell are stalking me on Twitter reasons. My neighborhood around 3 blocks around my house is lit up with. I
don't want to hear this,
5G.
Renee. I don't want to hear this at all.
It's only 2 times faster. It's not like millimeter wave. So I get like 150 on LTE and I get like 300 on 5G. Down.
That's still awesome. You know what I mean? Like I think clearly you put a little birdie out to your contacts like, hey guys, I'm testing these phones. If you want your service to look really good, why don't you just bump it up a little bit? So you've at least experienced a bump, not the kind of ultra crazy right next to the antenna type millimeter wave type stuff, but you've actually seen an increase and you're happy with it?
Yeah, I don't think most of the world is ever going to get millimeter wave. I think that's going to end up being like in dense US cities and arenas and places like that. So there's two things I really like about it. One is, yeah, there's a speed increase, which is nice. But like you said, unless you're sitting on top of the antenna by yourself in a city, you never get the full potential. But just it goes from 20 to 100 in terms of aggregation. And that just means like a 5 times increase in throughput. So it can handle much more signal on all of those towers. And especially for people who are used to getting really bad LTE, even if they just replace that with FR1, frequency range 1, like the low band, mid-band, the low band and mid-band of 5G, they'll be so much better off. Even just the Qualcomm modems, now they go 2 gigabit LTE, they'll be so much better off.
Speed 5G, I guess for you, you're happy with it because you experience at least a speed bump.
Yeah.
But the realistic aspect of it is, like I said, a lot of us are not going to really... I don't even know, quite honestly. I mean, I live in Southern California in the quote-unquote valley area, which doesn't have too many obstructions, but is not, let's say, as dense as downtown LA. I don't know if I'm going to see it anytime soon, especially from AT&T, right? It feels like Verizon is the one that's specifically really pushing at least harder from a standpoint of building out that millimeter wave network. But again, it's still not going to be readily available. It's not like they're going to put one right out my street unless I tell them my address right now. But...
well, it's also like the U.S. doesn't have the mid-band spectrum. I think T-Mobile has some of the best, and they just put out N41, which is really, really good mid-band. But I think like Verizon, AT&T, they just don't have the lower band capacity, so they're going in on wave, and the rest of the world, millimeter wave. The rest of the world is just laughing because they've got tons of mid-band frequency, and they'll be just fine without it.
The other thing with this iPhone 12 Pro, and I didn't realize when I picked it up, it felt a little wider and chunkier. It's a square design. I still think this is the best. This is a retro modern design, right? We're bridging the 4 and the 5, making it tighter, making it look gorgeous. I don't know how you felt because everyone kind of has, this is a personal thing, but when I gripped it, I actually preferred the 11 Pro in my hand, whether it's a case or not. I'm not saying this is bad. This is not going to stop me from buying one, but for you, because it's a boxier and it's not as smooth, did it make it wider to hold for you, or are you actually more comfortable for you to hold?
Yeah, well, it's those two things. Is that it went up in size from 5.8 to 6.1. So it went from the size, like the previous iPhone 11 Pro was smaller, and now it's the same size as the 11, as the 10R. And so it is physically bigger, and you have those squares on it. And I love the aesthetic, like that iPhone 4 Braun and Leica. It's just so good to look at. But because we lost the curves and increased the size at the same time, I like the size. I always preferred the 11 and the 10R size. It's like the Goldilocks size for me. But it does feel like more of a chunk when you're holding it. And some people like it because it feels more secure. It's digging into your hands. And other people hate it. It's like, stop digging into my hands.
Yeah, it's, what it is, I even put on my video, right? So I had to look this up just to give people a reference. So the average male hand span, so if we're talking from like thumb to pinky average. We're talking about hand size here, okay?
Not NBA, not NBA players, just normal.
Yeah, not NBA players. I mean, they're going to need a Max their whole life, right? They're not going to be doing the mini's going to look like a domino in their fingers, right?
Yes.
But average male hand span 7.6 inches, female 6.8. I have just around an 8-inch hand span because, and actually surprising because I play a lot of basketball. My hands are typically the same size or bigger than a lot of people that are bigger than me. They're like, dude, your hands are big for your size. I'm like, thank you very much. Basketball related. But, I use that as a reference because for me, whether I have the thinnest silicone case or not, reaching to this extreme side now with my thumb is harder for me. Before I kind of comfortably would get right on top of that letter, I think the L on the end. But now with the new design, I really have to like overextend that thumb. And that's what I feel, right? That's where I'm like, oh, this does feel different. And it's not going to stop me from getting this phone, but you definitely feel it.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of why there's a mini this year, because that'll answer the people who really just always wanted a premium, smaller sized phone. And also the bigger Max, because they're going to figure you got to use two hands anyway. We might as well give you like a bigger two-handed experience to go with.
What do you think about MagSafe? Everyone kind of has their different take on it. We just had recently seen how Zollotech on YouTube pretty much did this like crazy power adapter test with all these different power adapters. And for people that aren't familiar with it, what his findings were is that, Apple tells us with MagSafe, you can get the highest throughput is 15 watts. But in his findings, only the new 20-watt Apple power adapter, if you were talking about Apple chargers right now, was the only one that was able to get to that 15 watts. I think the 18-watt adapter that came before it hit around 13. Even if you used Apple's MacBook 96-watt power adapter charging it, it only peak at 10 watts. So that's something that, we'll talk about the charger thing later. But, with MagSafe, what's your take on it? I love it because it kind of bridges a little bit of retro to me. I don't need it, but it does definitely have like kind of a fun fidget nostalgia factor. And, it's magnets on wireless charging that has always existed, but in Apple style, they kind of made it cool just cause, right? There's really, I don't know if we need it, but it's still, and it's something to the future of a platform that they're doing a lot of accessories, but I don't know if they need it. It doesn't perform as well as even a wired, but it's still really cool. I mean, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I love how they sort of low-key sold it as solving a problem that they created, because ever since they introduced the inductive charging with the iPhone 8 and iPhone 10, the backs have been just so slippery. If you put them on anything but a level surface, they'll race a Nexus 4 to crash diving on the floor. I think only the Galaxy Flip now has less friction coefficient than an iPhone. And wireless charging those, it's annoying because if you aren't perfect with your placement, it's gonna slide off that charger and not charge. And so this sort of solves that, and it's weird it took them this long because that's why they did it on the Apple Watch, because it was a small size and they wanted to make sure it was a perfect connection. And it makes, if you're gonna go wireless charging, it makes a lot of sense to me that you ensure, just like you have the plugs that physically position it in the wall, you have those magnets that physically position it. And I've seen some of the tests, and I forget because electrical engineering is not my forte, but there's like a voltage. There's like a voltage limit. Like if it hits a certain voltage, it'll switch to the 15 watt charging. And there's some like Anker and other third parties that hit that, and so it trips it into that mode, but not others. So it's like, I understand there's watts and amps and volts. I have no idea how they relate to each other, but like apparently it's more than just wattage, and if you look on the thing you'll see a number, and if it's that number then you're fine. But to me that's just like, it's an added level of complexity. I just want to slap that sucker on the side like a face hugger from Aliens and let it go.
Just let's do its thing. What do you think about the MagSafe cases? I can't remember, did you held up your phone? Are you a naked iPhone guy?
Yeah, I tend to keep it the way that, nature and Johnny Ive intended. I don't know if that's good or bad or not.
I mean, how about this? I'm assuming you get Apple Care. How many accidents have you had? Because, see, I jumped on the naked bandwagon for a while with the 10, and literally right when I decided to take the case off, okay, fine, I had to drop. That wasn't like on purpose or, it just was a freak thing. But I literally got it serviced, and then the next week, it fell out of my hand from arguably only 2 feet, and then the screen shattered again. I'm like, okay, the naked life was not meant for me, right? I used those 2 uses in less than a week, so I just kind of like ran back to my little Casey case. But for you, I mean, have you had many accidents with it?
So I did it for many, many, many years, and then I had 2 accidents with the iPhone 8. As soon as I got it, it slid off a table and smashed onto tiles, and I'm like, the glass back, and that made me reassess it. And I had that fixed right away. And then the same winter, I was too lazy to walk to where the stairs were, and I'm like, it's Canada, and I just walked down the hill to get to the entry door for the mall. And sometimes you have snow on top of ice, and I put my foot down and I just slid and I fell and landed right on my pocket that had the phone on it. So I feel like that iPhone 8 gave its life for me, but it was just it hit the ice and just completely shattered. So two of them, knock wood.
Okay. So, we talked about MagSafe stuff, and it leads to kind of the whole charger, including it or not. What has been your take from the start, and has it changed now that you have the iPhone 12 Pro?
You mean like not having the charger in the box?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate it. I think it's like, I get it from an intellectual point of view where yes, it's one less component. Yes, it's smaller boxes, fits more in a container, all of that, yes. But just, it feels like it's the wrong time. Like, I feel like I'm Walt Mossberg telling Steve Jobs he took something away a year too early, because most people don't have the USB-C adapters, and it's just it creates a bad experience, and that's never the sort of thing you want to see from Apple. It's like a lot of people won't know there's no charger. They'll assume there is one, so they'll get home and they'll open the box and there won't be one, or they won't have one, or they'll have to find an older cable. And Apple doesn't have the greatest durability on their cables. So I think if they had done this as a gradual process, like announced, we're including them in the box this year, but next year we're going to stop. So make sure, or just done something like if you really need one, check this box and we'll ship one to you. Because for now, it just seems like it's sort of like when they moved from dock to Lightning. It theoretically wasn't a problem, but they didn't have adapters available for like 2 or 3 weeks, so it was chaos. Just make sure people have what they need until they're really they're really comfortable and happy with it, and then move us forward. And I know this is it's the same thing with taking the headphone jack away but creating AirPods. It sort of drives people to the future. But even the MagSafe doesn't come with the stupid plug. And that to me is like, well, you can't just take that away and then say buy MagSafe, and then like MagSafe doesn't come with it. At least give it to me, stupid MagSafe.
This is what's interesting to me is I've been so used to hearing people say, "Oh, we don't need the charger." Like I literally have the same exact take as you. I see what they're doing, and it's of all the companies, Apple sells so many phones. I'm glad that they're stepping up, and they've done this for years, quite honestly, about being conscious about the environment. But that's still, it's part of the story, but not necessarily the whole story. When you even just putting a Lightning to USB-C cable, there's a lot of people that are going to think it's the same cable they've had, right? They're going to look at it and not really look at it, because you and I, we're deep in this tech thing, but I always think first of like my mom, like who's really the general most common Apple user, right? They're going to open that thing up, they pull out the cord, and then they're going to they might even try and like kind of force connect it to the power adapter that they have, and they're going to wonder why it doesn't work. And then they're going to have to go to the shop, someone's going to have to tell them this. They're going to have to buy a $19 power adapter for a connection they don't have. The thing that really struck me is every time I was vocal about not being happy that they don't put a power adapter in for all the reasons that you talked about, people's first thing would be, oh, just plug it into a MacBook with USB-C. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how many people have a MacBook or MacBook Pro and an iPhone that happens to have a USB-C port? I would guess, I don't know, I'm going to guess it's under 20% of iPhone users. It might be less. I don't know this for a fact, but it's not a lot. It's not anywhere near 50%, that's for sure. So, it also reminds me sometimes the perspective of a lot of Apple users. If you're an early adopter and you move forward, you think, and Apple wants this too, quite honestly, you think that, oh, like you live the Apple way, there's a solution. Go buy this, go that. But this is not what is for the normal user. And so for me, it's really frustrating to see, before we even found out about MagSafe charging only at its optimal point with the new power adapter that is not included, that just added another kind of bullet point to why they should have included the $19 power adapter. Or to your point, a great point, create some sort of transitional year, right? Something. Or even, and someone would say, oh, why don't you just put in the Pros? Well, guess what? I think actually the people that are buying the 12 and the 12 mini are the ones that aren't familiar about the fact that this is a new connection versus the Pro and Pro Max users. So, it's unfortunate that, like you said, they're ahead of time, but I don't think there's a reason to do this, and it's more frustrating than it's for people like you and I. I remember I bit the bullet about a year ago, and I bought all these USB-C power adapters, and I was mad about it, but I knew, look, this is my MacBooks have it, got to get it for my Apple Watch. I just want to be on that same thing, but that is not the normal experience for your general Apple consumer. And so, I could have said, just go buy a power adapter. No, I'm not. It should have been included.
Yeah, and I feel like I think you are too at times, like at war with our tech nerdy friends who keep forgetting that normal people don't live our lives. Like they don't get phones every year like we do. They don't have the latest ports. Like most people have a several-year-old iPhone and have a Windows PC with like really old USB-A ports. And so every time someone says like, oh, Apple should do all this USB-C things, like especially years ago, it's like nobody has that. You have 8 of those because you bought both versions of the Switch, and you have 19 Android phones, and it just came like the vendor sent them all to you. But normal people just trying to live their lives. And they don't have this. They don't know what this is. They don't know why people hate them. So they keep changing the cable on them, and they're going to cut us at a certain point if we don't stop.
Yeah, I know they're not going to change this, but I just think about my mom, and there's no way she's going to. I don't even, we don't even live in the same city, and if whenever that happens, the fact that I have to explain it to her is already a bad experience.
I just ordered, like, I have a relative who's updating from the 6S, and I just ordered it for them with the power cable, with the power adapter, because I just didn't. Otherwise, it would be a constant stream of why are they doing this to me?
Were there any other things we haven't talked about for you that stood out, whether good or bad, about the 12 Pro with your experience?
No, I mean, I think battery life is going to be a little bit harder on this, especially if you are using the new recording modes a lot and you are on 5G. Like if I go onto 5G, I can watch the battery, and I'm not even on millimeter wave, which I've heard is worse. I can watch the battery go down. Apple's using the X55 modem, which is another thing that's hilarious to me because like everyone's complaining about 5G on the iPhone. Like you can't use 5G on dual SIM, and you can't, there's a couple other things. I'm like, that's the X55 modem. That's what everybody on Android has been living with for a year. This is not anything new. It's just Apple, like it starts now, but Apple didn't invent the pain now. That pain is just real. So I think like for this generation, we're going to be hit harder on battery life than we will be next year when there's like an X60 or a 65 modem on a 7 or 5 nanometer process, and the power management is way better again.
Yeah, you know what's weird for me? I know there's always going to be updates and patches, but once iOS 14 came out, it destroyed my 11 Pro battery, and my 11 Pro hasn't recovered since. Like I don't even use widgets on main home screens. It's just on the side still. So it's weird that at least right now, up to this point, every day, my 12 Pro gets about now maybe 3-4 hours more than my 11 Pro did after the hit. So it's weird, and I know like pretty much for most people it's been less, but I can only speak from my own experiences. Maybe that changes over time. Who knows? Maybe they fix whatever's affecting my 11 Pro. My battery health is perfectly fine on it, but it's kind of funny for me. I'm like, hey, my battery life's better. I like this.
Yes.
and it's going to be different for different people. Also, depending on your use case, I don't ever access 5G, so that probably helps as well, right? Yeah. And we're mostly home anyways. We're on Wi-Fi like all the time.
It's true. Like up until I was doing these tests, I don't know the last time I used cellular data.
Yeah.
I have no idea. But like to your point, it's just like a lot of people will say, hey, are you having this problem on your iPhone? Like especially on Twitter, or they'll link me to a discussion thread. And it's just like, there's a billion of these phones on the market now, and everything is so butterfly effect. Like every different app you have, every different configuration, it means that only a small percentage of people have any particular problem, but that's still millions of people. And I feel bad when I don't have it because I can't help troubleshoot it. And especially like when there's a new operating system, it feels like there's always some people who get a really bad battery hit whenever there's a new OS. Some people get their Bluetooth fixed or broken, get their Wi-Fi fixed or broken. And it's not enough people that you can say it's like a major issue. It's just, this combination of this app and this setting and this thing is just destroying you. And it's going to take to like 14.2 or 3 before Apple figures it out. I always get super frustrated.
Yeah, I'm excited for 14.2 because I'm anticipating the emojis to finally be unlocked that I've been waiting for how long now? I want my emojis.
Right? Feels like.
Yeah, it takes some time. So Renee, at least if we're sticking with the 12 Pro at the moment, what's your take on for a recommendation depending on what a user has? Who is this phone for if you're talking about a potential upgrade?
Yeah, so for me, like if you mean like just the difference between the 12 and the 12 Pro, or in general.
Let's say, how about this? Whatever phone you have right now, what is it worth going to a 12 Pro? We'll start with that.
Yeah, so I don't ever think it's really worth people upgrading. Like I think now the phones last 3-4 years, they're just fine. So my always advice is just wait as long as you possibly can to upgrade, and then buy when you absolutely have to, and then just enjoy the hell out of it, because there'll always be something next. So don't feel like, oh, but now I'm upset because they made a 2.0 version. There'll just always be something next. The triggers for me is if it has been like, especially if you're no longer getting updates on your phone, like the iPhone 6 is no longer being updated, or if it's long enough that, like there'll be a really big jump from an iPhone 6S or iPhone 7. And a lot of people are on yearly update programs now, so they just get the new phone. It doesn't matter. But otherwise, you have to really want, like I know people who the iPhone is their only camera, and they'll say things like, it's what I take pictures of my kids with, and I can never go back in time and get a better photo of my kids, so I always want the best camera I can every year. And so if that's you, like you're upgrading every year anyway. So to me, it's like those two those two extremes. Either buy when your old device really ages out, or just figure out the early annual update thing, and either way you'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think quite honestly, you and I are lock and step with our entire evaluation of the 12 Pro. And I think it partially comes from how much maybe we've seen of things, you know what I'm saying? Where some people are like, get it, it's the greatest. I'm like, dude, if you have an 11 Pro, there is honestly no reason to get the 12 Pro in my mind. Like I said it on my review, if I was not reviewing tech, I would definitely not upgrade right now. The camera is what gets me excited until Dolby Vision HDR catches up, or the rest of the world, I guess we should say, catches up to Dolby Vision HDR then. And that's compelling for you, then go for it. But, even if you got a 10S, you got a 10, if you're happy with your phone, don't upgrade. There's no need to have this FOMO. You watch it. I think that if I think about, because I don't watch everyone's reviews, because I don't want it to influence my thoughts before my review, I think if you keep on watching these reviews, I think it almost tells you, like, I should upgrade. Because everyone's talking about the newest thing. And you just watch 4 or 5 of these things, I got to imagine that's going to influence you a little bit.
Well, I just, again, I'm really pressing for like a revolution a little bit in how we handle this stuff, because like technology is mature now. It used to be like smartphones were like very different, and there were all sorts of, like 10 years ago, you never knew what was happening. It was the Palm Pre, the iPhone, and the Palm Pre, and then the G1. It was just like all fresh and crazy every year, but they're really established now. And you don't see car reviewers really talk about, should you update from Toyota 2020 to Toyota 2021, or like appliance, like Wirecutter's not like, if you have Frigidaire 2020, should you get Frigidaire 2021? Like it doesn't even enter their minds. They're like, this is the fridge we recommend now. If you're in the market for a fridge, you should get this fridge. Here's the less expensive version. Here's the premium option. But it's never like year-over-year upgrades. And I wish we'd get over that too, because I don't think anybody should year-over-year upgrade unless you are that self-identified tech nerd, you're on a yearly update program, or like you want to hand yours down and get a new one for whatever reason. Like there's some super compelling feature. Otherwise, I think we should treat this stuff like everything else has been treated for years now, and just give people buying advice for that year.
And I think what's interesting, and obviously we know that this is part of the equation, is that when you combine a product that does yearly updates, and then, the fact that whether it's Android or Apple, you have a certain level of fanaticism around it, right? That's what really drives it. Because if we looked at these things like refrigerators or even like TVs, there's no way there's no way we would upgrade every year.
There's a new TV every year, but you don't think about it every year.
Yeah, right? And, TVs, okay, you have like higher end TVs on the, let's call it like over $2,000 range, right?
Yeah.
But a phone is arguably half that price for the top tier model, and people are still getting one. There's a good group of people that are still getting one every year. Yeah. And it's also kind of speaks to maybe where we're at as I don't know. I mean, we're kind of going on tangent. A society where, I think we're so influenced by, keeping up with the Joneses, seeing social media posts of what someone has. Because, for example, I was very fortunate, and Sony hooked me up with a PS5, and people are like, oh my gosh, right? And I think that type of thinking influences you to always want the newest thing, because you see someone, quote unquote, with influence. I hate the word influencer, but you see someone with influence that has the newest thing. You want that newest thing too.
For sure.
Instead of like, it's okay. You don't gotta have it. Like, I didn't get an Xbox. I'm okay, right? Like, Microsoft didn't send me the newest Series X. I'm okay with that. Like, we shouldn't be so wrapped up with this idea of how people perceive us based on the phone that we have, but we do. I mean, you see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, like I go to my mom with this too. Like my mom is still using an iPhone 7, and she hasn't said word one. Like she watches the Apple events because she knows I'm interested in them, and she thinks some of the stuff is cool. But I think she has an original iPad Pro still, and it works, so she has no intention of upgrading. But like every few years, she'll be like, I want to redo like the counters in my kitchen, or I want to get a new phone. It's just, or I need a new TV because like it's not working as well anymore. But it's like they'll get around to it eventually when it feels like they need something new, but it's not this year over year sort of drive thing. And I think that's just way healthier.
Yeah, it's a really interesting take that you kind of talk about changing the way we perceive these things. Although, you and I both know it's not going to happen anytime soon, but I think you're absolutely right on the money with that. Let's talk about 12 Pro versus 12. $200 cheaper from a starting base price point. Using the 12, other than I barely feel any difference, quite honestly. Yeah. It's kind of amazing, actually, how good the 12 is versus the 12 Pro. I mean, you basically compared the two in your review. What was your overall take on the 12 versus the 12 Pro?
Yeah, it's super interesting to me because this year, for a variety of reasons, mostly because 2020 is just weird, Apple has an iPad Air that is almost as good as an iPad Pro, just for a couple $100 less, and an iPhone 12 that's almost as good as an iPhone 12 Pro, just for a couple $100 less. And you can look at that because the prices on the Air and the iPhone 12 went up, and Apple held the prices on the Pro and the iPhone 12 Pro. Sorry, and Apple held the prices on the iPad Pro and the iPhone 12 Pro. So you're getting almost a Pro for a little bit less, but then if you spend that little bit extra, you're getting the full-on Pro. And I think that almost caters to both audiences. Like, I'm sure if they had their druthers, the Pros would have been much better updated this year in a variety of ways. But for right now, it's like you can say, I have the iPhone 12 and I don't care about those things. I saved myself $200. Or you could say, it was only an extra $200 and now I have these couple of extra things. And it really plays off both ways. And I think they fell into that sort of accidentally, or because they figured out how to deal with 2020.
I mean, they're also looking at the numbers of just how, they can see every single. They don't reveal the sales numbers to us anymore, right? We kind of have to take estimations. But, we've seen this. I mean, there are 4 iPhones in the lineup this year. There are 4 hitting at every price. This is actually Tim Cook's kind of strategy now, fully optimized, where there was a time where we're like 2 phone models. You're crazy.
5C and 5S?
Like, what are you talking about? Now it's 4 models. Did you miss anything though for yourself in the 12, or it's just kind of that whole $200 decide or not decide? I mean, I know you talk about the camera a lot, but did you miss anything specifically just for you?
Yeah, so they just raised the bar. Like, it's got the OLED display, and I'm one of those people that OLED is nice, but on a phone it's nowhere nearly as important to me as a television. And the iPhone 11 and 10R, the displays were so good, I think it was just drama that separated them. So it was just like a nice to have, but it greatly increased the cost of those devices. For me though, I love that camera. Like, I love having a telephoto camera. So I will always reach for the Pro if it's available. I do like the fancier colors though, and I like that Apple is being more colorful, both on the Air and on the iPhone 12. And I just wish that they would allow Pros to be a little bit more, just have a party at the Industrial Design Group and let the Pros have some color too.
Like, maybe 2021 is that year, Renee, because the color I wanted the most of the entire lineup was that nice frosty sagey green color. Like, I love that aesthetic. It's kind of pastel-y. It matches with so many color tones. And I'm like, but I need I got to go for the camera, but I look at the green 12 and I'm like, damn, that thing looks beautiful. I
want the product red on the Pro. Like, just give me the product red on the Pro.
Yes, yeah, and this is another thing that I noticed, this year, tech in general, obviously, right, coronavirus has changed kind of our perspective, and even maybe hopefully brought some of us back down to earth of spending habits and just realize, changing how we even deal with our finances. But I thought more than any year across the board, the tech community, tech reviewers talked about, we're almost arguably more excited about colors this year on products than actual specs, because we talked about this. These products are so mature now. It's like people were saying out loud, should I upgrade because of this color? Like,
Yes.
I saw that a lot. I felt that, but I'm not going to do that. But, this whole kind of color psychology is driving sales, not even just among, but people in general. I got to imagine that is playing a role. So they need to bring more. The pros look nice. I get it. You don't need to, just because it says pro doesn't mean you have to have like the snooty, refined colors. Give me some of that fun. Give me some of that fun.
Like, I refuse to believe manufacturers are stupid. I think sometimes their interests aren't aligned with consumers, because they're still profit-making businesses. But when you look at like what Huawei does with colors and what Samsung does with colors and what Apple does with colors, and I just remember the iPhone 5S and everyone making fun of the gold rumors and then the gold announcement, and then being super angry that the gold sold out and they couldn't get one. And it's just like, these companies know, like they know what we're buying. They literally have the receipts for what we're buying. So they're not just doing this stuff to be silly, that we want this stuff.
You touched on something that I forgot to ask you about, and probably one of my biggest bugaboos, at least of the presentation versus what we know, and Apple's use of the word zoom range, right? And using the word optical zoom range. Now, I know that myself and many people that saw that at first thought we were going right out of the gates, 5x optical zoom range. Our brains jumped immediately to the assumption 5x optical zoom. And it's really 4.5 range, not even 5x optical range, right? And, so you're getting basically a true 2.5 optical on the Pro Max, a true 2x optical zoom on the Pros. You followed them for a long time. Was that curious to you? I mean, I've never seen, I just don't, I know companies don't like to kind of shape a narrative and also how people perceive things, but that was kind of a little different if you ask me. It hit a lot, and I don't want to say they were trying to deliberately be deceptive. I don't think that's the point. They didn't want to admit like, hey, we only got a 2x zoom still, optical zoom. But I didn't like that. I didn't like how it was presented. It kind of made me go like, ugh, why are you doing that, Apple? That's not normally, you don't really do things that deliberately. How did you feel about that whole situation?
Yeah, I have two modes. Like, camera nerd Renee really gets annoyed by a lot of the stuff that they talk about. Like, I'm not talking about deep trench isolation, because that kind of stuff is nerdy fun. But when they say things like it's a wide angle, it's really normal. And the telephoto, it's really not a telephoto. And zoom, like even the iPhone 7, it doesn't zoom. It goes from an effective 32 to an effective 54. Like it's not like a zoom lens like on a camera where I can twist something and optically move in and out of it. I'm just choosing between two discrete prime lenses, basically. So the whole thing, like, I get on one level that they're trying to explain camera concepts to people who don't know them. And I tend to say it's steps, like it'll step from an ultra wide to a quote unquote wide to a quote unquote tele. But yeah, it's like you're going back or you're going forward. It's not what people assume, especially if you know what a zoom is. It's not at all what you expect. And I always think, yes, talk to people in language they understand, but treat them like they're intelligent and don't make it seem like it's something it's not. Yeah. And I was horribly confused too. I'm like, are they actually, because one of my big wish list items for these iPhones was better zoom, because I think that's one of the areas Apple's really behind. Like Huawei and Samsung have their periscopes. Google was doing super res zoom. And it does look like Apple is applying smart HDR for smart zoom now, because like 10x digital looks way better than it did last year. So I think they're doing sort of what Google did last year with the Pixel 4, but that's not a zoom. It's still different in kind.
Yeah, I was just frustrated about it, because everyone, even from tech people to my friends, were like, "Oh my gosh, the iPhone finally has a 5x optical." I'm like, no,
right?
No.
And you want that because like your kids are in the park or your dog is running around or you're sightseeing and you want to be able to go across the street without going across the street. It's an important feature and it's one I still think they really need to address. And I was confused like you. I thought we got it and then I'm like, what happened to my Zoom?
Where did it go? It's all gone.
But
the highest level zoom, at least optical 2.5, is going to be in the Pro Max. Now we have the Mini, right? The Mini, that price point, $699, that size. I mean, we don't know yet, but I've got to imagine that it'd either be the 12 or that one might be the best selling iPhone of this bunch. I don't know what you think about that. But in addition to that, are you a Pro Max guy for this year? Or because I'm really curious about that camera. Now, I've already felt how big this is. Quite honestly, I'm not going to put anything bigger in my pocket. But everything they say when they talk about the 47% larger sensor, the pictures they've shown of some of the night mode stuff that I definitely cannot get from this, I'm really curious what that camera's going to be like. So where are you at kind of thinking of which model is going to be the top seller and then your thoughts on the Pro Max, even though we haven't seen it yet?
Yeah, I think it's still going to be the 12. Because I think there's a market for the smaller phone. It's not that inexpensive. It's not like iPhone SE inexpensive where they'll get a big boost off people wanting to spend less. So it'll really be the people who like smaller phones. And I think that's just a slightly smaller market, especially because it's going to come with a smaller battery. And that's going to be, I think, a point of tension. Everyone always says, I want it smaller, but everything else the same. And it's like physics. Physics is a jerk.
You're talking about the 12 Mini. You mean the 12 Mini right now, correct?
Yeah, the 12 Mini.
Yeah, 12 Mini, yes.
And the Max will be the opposite. Like, I really want the Max because I really want the best camera I can get. And I use the Plus models. I used the 7 Plus, and I used the 6 Plus, 6S Plus, 7 Plus, even the 8 Plus because I always wanted the biggest camera. But when the 10S Max came out, I just didn't feel the need for it. I stayed with the 10S. The screen was big enough and it wasn't this giant colossus like Peter Rasputin in my hands anymore.
Hold up, dropping the Marvel X-Men. Okay. You got it in there. I appreciate that. I love
That's what I named. I actually I name all my phones after X-Men. So I had that.
Really?
Well, except for last year. Last year I went with Warbird, Binary, and Marvel just because I was enamored.
Okay. Hold on. Finish your Pro Max point, and I need to find out which X-Men you named. This is cool. Okay, so anyways, continuing on with the Pro Max.
So I'm for sure getting one, and I will try to use it as my daily phone. If it's just too big, though, I'm gonna have to buy a Pro as well. I've just bought a 12 so far, but I'll buy a Pro as well and use that as my daily, and then just use the Pro Max as like an additional camera for my YouTubing.
So you're the one that you bought is a 12. With the assumption or thinking that you're hoping the 12 Pro Max delivers on those camera promises, because you don't need a 12 Pro and a 12 Pro Max. It's either that makes sense. That's actually really cool. Okay, that's really cool that you're thinking of that setup, because also one fits in your pocket and the only one you bring that out when you really want to get those good camera stuff. Yeah. So I know we're going back through a lot of iPhones, but I'd like to hear at least the ones you can remember, which X-Men you associated with which iPhones. This is really interesting.
Yeah, so I have to try to remember. So right now,
what's the 12? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
But my 12 and my 12 Pro are Mystique and Magic. Mystique because of the blue. I had to go with Mystique because of the blue.
That's a great call.
And I'm thinking the Max might end up being Juggernaut because it's just so big. I don't know.
I was thinking in my brain. I was like, if you haven't used Juggernaut yet, that would be a good one.
Last year I deviated because of the Avengers, and I just went with Binary because the 2 cameras, and then Warbird for the Pro, and then Marvel for the Pro Max. The year before that, the 10S Max was Colossus, and the 10S I'm blanking on. But before that, the 8 and the 8 Plus were Siren and Banshee, and the 10 was Shadowcat. And I've had Cyclops and Havoc. I think where the 7s were Cyclops and Havoc. The 7 because it only had one eye.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I was like, that's cool. Wasn't that a single lens? That's cool.
Yeah, and then it goes back, but I'd have to find some record of it to see.
That's a fun naming convention. I dig that a lot. I mean, being a comic book nerd like we both are, that is really cool. Okay, so we have the entire lineup.
Oh, and I have to add, sorry, I apologize. The first
please.
time they did product red, that was Phoenix because it had to be. So the red 7 was Phoenix.
I'm trying to think who would, for a gold one, is there?
I think my gold one was Dazzler. I think when I had the gold one, it was Dazzler.
That's pretty good. That's good. I mean, if they come up with some like super like metal, like just like the ultra industrial metal one that looks like a adamantium claw, then we gotta get Wolverine. Even the 10 could have been Wolverine.
I haven't used Wolverine yet. That's odd because I'm Canadian, but it just hasn't happened.
That's true. That's important. All right, Renee. So love your takes on the whole iPhone family. You own a 12. You're looking to get the 12 Pro Max. Yeah. I wanted to also, before we kind of wrap up, and thanks for so much of your time. There's so much more stuff that's coming out that Apple's been working on. I'm genuinely excited for this whole Apple Silicon transition, what it means for the line, what it means for integration now. If you think about what they've done with the phone and everything they've done by controlling 80% of what goes in here, and now applying that to the Mac line, and then building these connections that we haven't even necessarily thought about between this and those, because they can really control every aspect of it. What are you excited about with Apple Silicon? I know you're pretty juiced for it too.
Yeah, so it's exactly what you mentioned. It's the integration. And it's one of those things that I think people don't always appreciate, especially if you're not like a Final Cut Pro user, for example. Because even when, like, there was this really weird time where people who didn't understand how benchmarks worked. Like, yes, there was a bug in the 2017 MacBook Pro. They fixed it. But people didn't know how benchmarks worked. They're like, Macs are thermally throttled. I'm throwing mine in the trash, and I'm buying this HP. And they're using Premiere, and I'm like, benchmarks are meaningless. Like, the only benchmarks that matters is time to completed work. Like, I take footage, I ingest it, I edit it, I export it, and I'm uploading to YouTube. And the speed, like, to make that speed the shortest amount possible is the only thing that matters to me. And the way that Apple does things like Final Cut Pro, I mean, I've used Adobe for decades. I still have an Adobe subscription, but they discovered GPU acceleration last year, and I'm hitting my watch like Judge Judy, going, "Come on."
Yo, I know how you feel. I've just stuck with it, but yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but you look at Apple, and like even now, Jonathan Morrison is doing these tests on iMovie on iPad, and Aaron from Zollotech did some too, and the export speeds for this footage are ridiculous, and that's because they're not using merchant silicon, like a chip that's supposed to do 8 different things for 3 different vendors. They're using stuff that they made. And so my dream is that sort of what we saw with the Mac Pro, where they have like afterburner cards, is that they'll make this Apple Silicon specifically to accelerate the things that Mac people typically do. And in the beginning, that'll be like virtualization and emulation and, a bunch of nerdy things for developers, sure. But also, like, if you use Logic or you use Final Cut, there's specific silicon in there that makes it just even faster. It's like an afterburner laptop, basically. And that to me is like, yes, it won't be like as good a general computer, and there'll still be PCs for people who want. And for gaming, I have no delusions about Apple and gaming. But just for me as a Final Cut user, I expect whatever the Apple Silicon MacBook Pro, maybe not year 1, but like year 2, year 3, is going to be monstrous in ways we don't even expect yet.
I'm totally on board with you there, and I've always thought that once they put Final Cut Pro on an iPad Pro, which they can, and we know that they're doing something with that might be the thing that makes me finally jump over to Final Cut Pro. And when you're starting, like, you and I are both independent, I've been on Premiere for so long, I didn't want to take the time to change my brain to learn Final Cut when it was important for me to get content out and make a living and build this thing up, right? Like, it takes time. Like, I have my timeline ready. I can throw my stuff in. I know exactly my workflow. Knowing that the GPU acceleration, the real-time rendering in the background makes a difference, but just the fact that my brain will have to pause maybe 20 different times right now to just kind of, wait, I do it here in this way and this way. Like, I'm not ready to jump over to Final Cut Pro, even though everyone's saying
I'm that way with Resolve. Everyone says like Resolve is so good at color grading. I'm like, I don't understand it. It's fine.
Yeah. And so, like anything, we work with what works best for us. But if if it gets to that point, like exactly what you're talking about, and all those benefits that we know are going to come, it's just a wait and see of what it actually is when it arrives. I mean, even just let's talk about battery life for the general consumer. That in itself is going to be a big step. Even if, look, there were rumblings that, a MacBook could get 20 hours of battery life. Okay, I don't even care about 20. If it gets like 4 or 5 more, that's a big jump for me too, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, Intel has been suffering lately. Like AMD is on fire, but Intel for, I think it's Rocket Lake, for the desktop, they're going back to 14 nanometers, and they're going to make up for it by just making the die bigger and running the voltage higher. And that's like, Apple's going to look at that for an iMac and go, nope, hard nope. Like it doesn't fit in our chassis. We're so sorry. So it makes a ton of sense to me. And I know some people are like, why don't you just go AMD? And I think AMD is doing really well now, but Intel was doing really well a few years ago. And I think they just finally want the same sort of certainty or control of their own destiny that they've had with iOS devices, which have worked out pretty good so far.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that has shown us that Apple can't actually handle this from a manufacturing, design, custom processor side. We already are hearing talks that they're working on their own custom GPU now.
Yeah.
That would pair with their own custom processor. You talk about a company kind of transforming themselves right in front of our eyes. This could be a thing where, Intel's always going to be around, AMD will always be around, but what happens in 5 years when maybe Apple's processors start ending up in other machines? Right? What happens if they decide that they're at a point in the game where they can actually start licensing this out to others? That, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's on the table.
Yeah, and I think what's potentially more I don't want to use the word dangerous, but like the only thing we haven't seen from Apple is higher wattage. Like they're running at 5 or 6 watts on an iPhone or an iPad, where like Intel's up at like I think 60, 90 watts, and NVIDIA and AMD are like 200 to 300 watts on those things. And I don't know if Apple would ever license silicon, but I do think it's highly likely that Qualcomm and even NVIDIA and AMD will duplicate their model, because AMD licenses x86 and x64. They invented x64, but I don't think they're beholden to it the way Intel is. And Qualcomm has struggled with it, but there's nothing that does the industry better than Apple just handing them a map and saying, hey, this is what we did.
It's the ultimate disruption right now that may not be the sexiest, but is, for us that follow this and are fans of it, it's really exciting. It's really exciting. And
my biggest disappointment is that for some reason, Samsung just cannot get their silicon together. Like Exynos has been terabad for 2 years, but they're exactly positioned like Apple, even more because they have their own fabs. Like they're struggling now with their 8 nanometer process. That's what NVIDIA's Ampere is on, and it's not quite as good. But if they could just get their act together, they could make like everything Apple makes for Windows, for Galaxy, for all of that, and then it gets like really exciting for consumers.
Yeah, and it's also part of it is what makes, I don't know, not what makes me sad, but it's look like Samsung does so many amazing things. Quite honestly, from a tech standpoint, they arguably are one of those companies that actually drive these trends that don't become popular until, quite honestly, a big machine like Apple does it. Like it's crazy, right? The innovation is there, but from a marketing standpoint and a perception standpoint. I'm talking more about US. In Korea, they crush it, right? But even talking to Samsung reps, they talk about how some of the younger generation is iPhone, and they're, even though Samsung has a huge hold over in Korea, because Samsung over there is more than just phones, it's refrigerators, it's appliances. It's actually like there's national pride that people don't understand. In the US, they think about Samsung, and I don't like their phone, but over in Korea, it's part of the life. They own like pharmacies and grocery stores. Like Samsung is a multinational conglomerate over there, where here it's like, it's just tech products. So
yes,
they do a lot of amazing things, but it always kind of makes me sad. But it just the way the dynamic is look, Apple doesn't even have reverse wireless charging on their phone yet. Yep. There was a recent report that an FCC filing revealed that it could actually be there, but for whatever reason, maybe the charging wasn't up to Apple's standard and they didn't actually flip that switch. No, people don't really talk about reverse wireless charging, and yes, it will drain your phone more, But the fact that it exists is kind of badass, and I can only imagine maybe this is iPhone 13 2021 when they start saying you can charge your AirPods on an iPhone when you can already charge your AirPods on a Samsung phone right now, right?
Yeah.
Through wireless charge. Once
There's a
Apple
joke that
does
the Galaxy Note is the Silicon Valley AirPower.
It could be. It could be. It really is. So, you know.
I think Gurman yesterday was saying that AirTags are supposed to charge that way.
Oh, yeah, could potentially charge that way as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, which is wild. So it's always a reminder of how in many ways, even if Apple does wrong, they can do no wrong. They're
just really good at packaging. Like they're really good at, like there's some, it's that thing that Steve Jobs talks about and that Jeff Bezos at Amazon talks about. It's like, don't talk to me about the technology, talk to me about the experience. Or don't tell me what you want to make, write the press release for how we're going to ship it. And I think a lot of companies are just like, oh, this is a cool chipset, let's put it in there and see what people do with it. Where like Apple never shipped NFC, they shipped Apple Pay. And so like as a user, I got an NFC radio. I'm not going to put these little tags in my house. I don't even, but Apple, boom, like they're just going to go running around and doing it. And they come up with these names that, you know, we find goofy sometimes, but for people, it's a feature set. Like MagSafe isn't just inductive charging. It's like, ooh, like they're just really good at making technology in a way that consumers see value and understand and are willing to pay for. And I think that's the area of innovation that they really excel in.
Yeah, that is absolutely their secret sauce. So Renee, you know, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. You do just amazing work. I'm happy and love to see how you've grown as a creator. I mean, you've been independent for less than a year. Is that right? Where are you at around? How many months?
6.5 months.
Dude, you're a beast. Everyone, you got to go check it out. YouTube.com/Rene Ritchie. What are other ways that they can find some of your work as well?
I'm just Rene Ritchie at everything. So Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. And I have to say, like, the only reason that I'm doing at least partially well is because of people like you. And you were very kind and very generous, especially at the beginning, helping me figure out just what the hell to do. And I really, really appreciate it.
Oh man, it's all about lifting the community up, lifting other people up. You know, I always find it fascinating how in certain industries there's like a competitive beef per se, but the internet is so big and so wide. Yeah. I never feel like you should actually watch 5 people to 10 people talking about a product. Don't watch one person. Watch multiple people. You're gonna learn different things from different people. You're gonna like things and dislike things from multiple people. It's important to do that, and all we got to do is just click on a icon or a thumbnail and get it right in our hands. So that's why I've always, no matter how big or small a creator is, I always want to encourage them and just help in any way I can, and just kind of it's good juju. It's good juju to do that too.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Renee. Thanks again, man, and thanks for coming on the podcast and just hanging out and talking all things Apple. I mean, we'll do it again.
Yeah, man. Anytime. Thanks so much. I love this.